Hello and welcome to the third module. In this module, we'll talk about data visualization. Now, this is a short module and it only has two videos. Now, in this first video, we will introduce the concept of data visualization and talk about why it is important. We'll also briefly mention the principles of effective data visualization. So, what is data visualization? Now imagine you have a pile of numbers and statistics and information. It's like having pieces of a puzzle. Now data visualization is the process of assembling all of those puzzle pieces into a meaningful picture. A story, a story that anyone can understand in one glance. That's the high level definition of data visualization. It helps you put together the puzzle pieces of numbers and statistics and information into a meaningful picture. That's the high level definition. More specifically, as you can read here, data visualization is the process of representing data and information in a graphical form, and which involves naturally the use of visual elements to communicate complex information in a clear and concise manner. Typically, in any data visualization, you will see there'll be charts, there'll be graphs and maps and dashboards. So all of these are the typical elements of a good data visualization. Here are a few examples. You see there's bar charts, there's line charts, pie charts, and these are called choropleth maps. And you typically come across them in reports, in newspapers, all sorts of places. Data visualization is a really common site these days. So why is data visualization important? It is important because it helps us see patterns and trends that might not be immediately obvious when you look at the data, the raw numbers. It helps us communicate information and insights to others more effectively. Like you might get the same picture from just looking at the Excel sheet full of data because you are working so closely with it. But to a third party, someone who is not familiar with the project or whatever it is, data visualization is easier to communicate that information to them. And I feel most importantly, data visualization helps us make data-driven decisions. So decisions are rooted in actual facts and not on opinions or assumptions. So data visualization helps us do that. So if you just look at this chart on the right hand side, this pie chart, you can see that the percentage of boys and girls differs quite significantly. There's just 15% more boys than girls, and there's hardly any trans students in the chart. Right? That doesn't mean that there are zero. The raw data will tell us how many trans students actually are. But instead of just going with the assumption that you have 50% of boys and girls, when you look at actual data, you can very clearly see that the percentage of boys is actually significantly more than that of girls. So you are not driven by opinions or assumptions, you're driven by facts. That is the value of data visualization. So it helps us reveal insights and relationships that might otherwise get missed if you just have rows and columns full of data. Now, if you look at this, it's just rows and columns full of data. It's an Excel sheet and there's some conditional highlighting also here, which is something we talked about in our previous modules. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult to make comparisons or to draw insights from this type of a visual. So data visualization is about taking this and turning it into something like this. You see, the same amount of information, the same data is contained in the Excel sheet that we were just looking at, and the same data is now presented in this visual manner. And this is a lot easier. It's easier to process the information when it is presented visually, because instead of putting everything in one table, you have the provision to segregate data into relevant categories. You see here, the data related to access is presented here, and areas of concern about enrollment and teachers is presented here. RT entitlements go here, PTR and SCR go there. So everything is very neatly categorized, and where numbers and tables are important, you use that. Where visual is important, you use that. So one important thing to highlight here is that Data visualization does not mean that you cannot use tables anymore. Tables are also an important element of data visualization, but you have to use them judiciously. That's the catch here. And just to be clear, this is all dummy data. Please don't, think that this is actual data. This is all dummy data. So, moving on. What makes a good chart? Very simply, a good chart is simple. What does that mean? It means that a good chart does not look cluttered, it has easily readable text, and it presents information in a simple manner. The simpler your chart, the better it is. So how can you make a good chart? There are several principles that can be put into use when trying to create an effective data visualization. I've listed 5 of these here, and I think if you just follow these 5, you will automatically be making, really, really good charts and data visualizations if you just follow these 5 points. So, what are these 5 points? To make a good chart, you first have to make sure that you use the right type of chart. Now, what does that mean? We'll talk about in the next video. And then you must provide labels, legends, and titles, and label the axes and the data points. All of that must be neatly labeled. And you should use fonts, color, and contrast effectively. Not everything should be in the same black and white color. If you have the provision to use color, you should use it judiciously. Okay? You shouldn't just use 5 different colors for 5 different lines and 5 different graphs. That is not helpful. And lastly, but most importantly, point number 5, using appropriate scale for the axis. Now we'll share some examples of all of these things in our next video. But until then, I hope this was a good introduction for you to what is data visualization and why it is important. In our next video, we will talk about good practices for data visualization, and in that we'll actually look at some specific examples of common types of charts that you would have to make on a day-to-day basis, and how you can make sure that the charts that you make, the data visualizations that you make, are able to communicate information more effectively and more truthfully. I'll see you in the next video.